and welcome to another episode of the Point of No Return podcast, the show where we go behind the scenes to understand the secrets and strategies of the most interesting Canadian technology companies. And this week's show, I had the pleasure of speaking with Mai Duong, co-founder at Swab The World. Mai is an old friend. We crossed paths together when we both worked in the agency world, and she has a very special story. So it's a bit of a different episode this week, and I want to say Mai is a real inspiration. If you listen to her story, she battled through cancer, survived having having the difficulty of not finding a stem cell donor. Mai explains her story and how she founded a nonprofit called Swab The World, and how they're really trying to attack this problem of stem cell donors globally, using obviously their platform. And it's a very inspirational story, and also one that I think shares a lot of advice for people that are dealing with health challenges, and how to not only survive them but come through stronger. So I want to say Mai has this kind of like stoic resiliency that you'll see. That's a real inspiration. Mai, I have to say, it seems that she's just getting started with this nonprofit. It's become kind of her life's mission. I really hope you enjoy today's conversation. Mai, it's such a pleasure to have you on. Like I was saying before recording this podcast, serves as an excuse to like catch up with old friends I haven't seen in a while, pick their brain, learn from smart people. And I think that is kind of a special episode because I know, like we were talking about before recording, where we haven't spoken, which feels like it's almost 10 years. It's kind of wild. And I've obviously followed your story from afar. Maybe a good place to start is your story, right? Because I think I'm going to rewind back to that point in time where Mai Duong was everywhere, right? Like, but now this movement that you started is more than just you, but it started with you, right? So I want to go back to that original story. So maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing your story again for the audience, I think it'd be a good starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. So we met when I was in at Touche, the advertising agency, and I was doing so well, and I was super healthy, and I had and I still have a baby, and she was 3 years old, and her name is Alice, and I was pregnant with my second child, and so I went to a routine blood test to see if everything is okay because I caught a cold and I couldn't get rid of the cold, and I thought that it was probably something very stupid, like a cold that everybody gets it. And so I went to the hospital just to see if the baby's okay. And then the doctor told me that I had to come back because it's probably leukemia. And then it hit me that it's cancer. So it was not even in my radar that leukemia was cancer because for me, leukemia is an illness for kids. And so I was 32 and I was in perfect shape. So I did not foresee that I would have that illness. And so I got to the hospital the next day in the maternity ward, and I had my oncologist coming in and said to me that with only the blood sample that I did, they knew that 100% it was leukemia, and I had to terminate the pregnancy in order to survive. So on Monday, I was given the news that I had leukemia. And in the maternity ward. So imagine when I was given the news that I was going to fight for my life and then I had to terminate the pregnancy and other women were giving birth. It was such a shock. And so on Tuesday, I was preparing for the abortion. On Wednesday, it happened. And then on Thursday, I didn't have anything. And on Friday, I started chemotherapy in isolation for, I think it was 6 weeks without seeing my daughter. And she was 3 years old. And so that was super hard. And after that big chemotherapy, I did even more chemotherapy, but going home. And I got to remission. So I got to remission after 10 months, going back to work, um, did travel, did a Disney thing with my parents. And so I was like, yeah, fuck cancer. I beat cancer. And then, so cancer came back. And so cancer came back this time, and it was really hard because I did not have a compatible donor. And so when we have leukemia or a blood illness and chemotherapy doesn't treat it, then we go to full blown, we need to have a stem cell transplant or a bone marrow transplant. And I did not know that. And I didn't know that we need to have the same ethnicity. And so I have a brother. And so my brother was not compatible with me. And on 25 million donors, nobody was compatible with me because of my ethnicity. And so I'm Vietnamese. And the doctor told me that, well, on 25 million donors, there's no one compatible with you because you're Vietnamese. And I was completely floored. How can this happen to me? Ethnicity never played a role. Race never played a role, honestly, in my life. Everything was going so well. I never had a problem with that. And so that happened, and it was so difficult. Honestly, it was like a slap in the face. How can you tell me that I have cancer and then tell me that I have a lower chance to survive because of my ethnicity?
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine like the circumstance of that moment in like in time. Like I think is very striking when you said the story of the maternity ward, but also then the realization of like something that is completely out of your control, right? Like my parents are Greek, right? I imagine like, hey, because you're Greek, you don't have access to, like
Yeah,
life-saving care. So completely out of your control. Like I can't imagine the powerlessness you must have felt, but obviously
it's
there were.
it's powerlessness. It's you're angry. You don't understand. You're sad. It's like so many emotions because not only that you have cancer, you have to rely on a perfect stranger. But on top of that, because of your ethnicity, you don't have access to that. And so I was completely blown away. And because we're in the advertising business, and so I was lucky enough to ask help from people in the media or people in the advertising industry to propel my story honestly and to reach as many Asians possible in the world. So it's not even in Canada, it's not even in Quebec. The perfect donor can come from anywhere in the world. Your perfect match can come from anywhere in the world. So we campaigned for 2 months because honestly, my deadline, and I had a real deadline. It's not like a stupid deadline for a report that you have to send to your boss, but it's actually you're fighting your life, and I had 2 months to live. Um, and at the end of 2 months of campaigning and doing um, anything and everything, honestly, to find a donor, and I knew that it was going to be difficult, but I knew that not doing anything, it wouldn't be an option. And so in my isolation room, I had the media coming in with their mask. Something like I'm seeing people with masks, like COVID. It for me, it's honestly, it's nothing. I was in isolation for such a long time with mask, and it was much harder than that. And so after 2 months, I did not have the perfect donor, but I was very lucky because I was saved by an umbilical cord. And so in the umbilical cord, there's not a lot of stem cells, but it was just enough for me because I lost so much weight. I was weighing 110 pounds, so 50 kilos. And that was just enough to give me a second chance at life. And so I still don't know. It's been 8 years and I will never know. I know that it's a mom in the States from Colorado that donated her umbilical cord when she gave birth. And she gave birth to her child and she saved my life. And she saved my family life at the same time. And I will never see her. I will never know who she is. And vice versa. She will never know that she saved my life.
Yeah, the concept of a perfect stranger, right? Where it's someone that saved you, and it's one of these life's mysteries.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I was in isolation receiving that gift of life, I told myself that I have to give back. I got so much that I really have to give back. And knowing that there's so many patients out there that don't have a match and that have been struggling like me, it's it wouldn't be fair. I got a very I was very lucky in my journey. I was really lucky because I had the media covering the story. I had people interested. I had so much support. But for somebody who's not in the same industry as I am, not to have the same media exposure, it wouldn't be fair. And so um, I decided that I was going to co-found a charity, and the mission of the charity is really to increase the awareness of stem cell donation and to diversify the registry, because right now 70% of donors are Caucasian when 88% of the population is not. And so we really need to get the word out there and to make sure that we have equal access to healthcare, no matter your ethnicity.
Yeah. I can't think of all the, what's the expression in French? A concours de circonstances,
Yeah,
that happened. It's like you happen to work in media, you happen to like obviously be a very nice, smart person that made friends that you're able to like ask for help at a very dire time. And like you worked at one of the premier agencies of the country, right? That it was able to spread the word. So it's like, it's kind of wild. Where it's like, going back to this notion of luck to a certain extent, or it's like, I can imagine your position of like, well, if I'm extremely lucky, but then there's going to be so many people that are not in my position.
absolutely. Because honestly, I was really lucky. And like you said, concours de circonstances, I had enough experience and enough seniority to have built a network to ask the media and to ask different agencies to help me in this quest. And honestly, I think I was a nice person. So nobody said, well, we're going to let her die. So a lot of people helped me out too. And I don't take that, honestly, I don't take that for granted at all. And building a charity from scratch for me was a no-brainer. I couldn't go back full time back to the agency life. And I love the agency life, but I wouldn't be able just to go back and s- like do as if nothing happened, because
Yeah.
something happened, something clicked in my mind, something happened. And so I just couldn't go back.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about a life changing moment, right? Like if there's any life changing moments or definition of one, I like it how, from the hospital, you decided like this mission's now bigger than just you. And you've made obviously Swab the World represent more than just your story and the Genesis story. Maybe if we shoot to today and talk about, like we'll talk about all the, the growth of what you've done, but gives a sense of scale of what you've built at Swab the World.
Yeah. So Swab the World, we have two sets of program. One is patient services, and the other one is education and recruitment. So patient services, it's to rebuild the same model as I had with the media landscape that I know. And so whenever there's a patient that doesn't have a match, we build a campaign towards that person, and then we tailor the media through that ethnicity in order to boost the number of donors. Same thing as me. And the other thing, that portion is really crucial because I still use my personal network with the media, my relationship with the media, to get a better price. And they give me bonus impressions, so it doesn't cost me that much. It doesn't cost the foundation that much, since I have these relationship with the media. And the second part is, um, we do education and recruitment, which means that we do conference. And we started the campaign by doing a conference in a med class at l'Université de Montréal. And after the class, I said, well, is there anybody that feel so compelled, like, to do more than swabbing and being more than a registered donor? Maybe you want to be an ambassador of Swab the World. Maybe you want to do conference like I'm doing. And initially we had 5 ambassadors, and that's the first year. And now we're at the fourth year, and we have over 100 ambassadors from different university. We have University of Toronto Scarborough, which we did a presentation in front of 1,800 students. And so from a tiny conference that we did with only 5 ambassadors, now we're reaching 5,000. I think last year we did 5,000 students. We reached 5,000 students, and we have over 100 ambassadors. So it really grew, and it really grew really fast. Students were really interested in that topic. They wanted to do more, and they're also great because they're in the target market. To become a donor, you have to be between the age of 18 and 35. So those kids, those students are bullseye in my target market. And when they talk to their peers and when they do conferences, they use their own lingo. And I make sure they understand that they should be using their own lingo to talk to their peers. They shouldn't be using some scientific words. They should be able to vulgarize it as if they were taking a beer and explaining what is stem cell donation to their friends.
So maybe let's use this platform then to talk about it. So like, what's like, if someone's listening, wants to become interested, what is the biggest risk for someone, right? Like what does it imply if people are afraid and don't want to do it? Maybe to unpack it and demystify it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the bone marrow, you have stem cells, and stem cells are baby cells that can reproduce in red blood cells, platelet, and white blood cells. And so that is very important to function, for a body to function. And so when somebody is ill, we need to find the same ethnicity, because when you don't find the same ethnicity, you have a lot of complications, and that can lead to death. And when you find the compatibility, yes, it is on the ethnicity, and it has nothing to do with the blood type. So when I receive a blood type from another person, I would change my blood type. So it has really it's within the DNA. And so the first thing is you have to be between the age of 18 and 35. You have to be completely healthy, and then you have to swab. And once you swab, you wait. Doesn't mean that you're going to be matched with a patient. But let's say hypothetically you get matched. You get a call by your registry in, I don't know, 3 months, 2 months, years later. And then the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to do a medical check. They want to see if you're still healthy and you still want to donate. And let's say you've gone to the hospital, they did a medical check, everything is good. Then you have two method of donation. One, which is the most popular, but nobody knows. It's called PBSC, which is peripheral blood stem cell donations. It's very similar to donating blood, but it's longer, which means that you're completely awake. It's not a surgery. And so 5 days prior to the D day, you give yourself injections, and that medication is going to boost your number of stem cells in your bone marrow to your bloodstream. And so during those 5 days, you will have backache, and you will feel achy as if you had a cold, because you have a lot of stem cells coming out of your bone marrow to your bloodstream. And then you go to the hospital, you're hooked to a machine. There's a machine that's going to take the stem cells, that's going to take the stem cells, and the blood that they don't need, you're going to get it back. So it takes about 4 to 6 hours, and then you go home, and then that's it. And from the moment that you give your stem cells, it's as if you were deflating. So you when you first start, you have a lot of stem cells, or you're very, how you say that in English? Un petit bonhomme Michelin. You're very
Yeah, like a little. Yeah, I understood I can't find the translation, but
yeah. So, but after the donation, you feel deflated, as if the pain is completely gone because you don't take that medication anymore. And if you do feel discomfort or pain, they're going to give you Tylenol. So it's nothing to cry to your mom about. It's not painful. So that is the first option. The second option is bone marrow. So that's 20% of the time. Most of the time, it's because it's a pediatric um, treatment. It's more popular with kids. And so you go there, it's general anesthesia. It lasts about 90 minutes. And then you you stay at the hospital. And when people talk about bone marrow, it's really the feeling is really when you fall on ice. And then again, they give you Tylenol, and then that's it. So it's not as scary as people would think it is. And we
Yeah.
have interviewed a lot of donors, and all donors have said the same thing. It's more scary than you think, and they would do it again. And I
Yeah.
think the most important thing is you choose your method of
Yeah.
donation.
Is the biggest barrier then awareness, right? You mentioned this 25 million mark. I imagine there's many more people that suffer from leukemia that need a stem cell transplant or donation versus the available pool, right? So like just from like a business perspective, like, like supply and demand, for instance, is the biggest barrier awareness? Because I give blood pretty regularly, but like I've never been really offered, for stem cells, right? This has not been top of mind for me.
Yeah, well, it hasn't been top of mind. It is a problem of awareness. It is a problem of education. Because if people don't know, they know a little bit, maybe they know a little bit about stem cells, but they don't know anything about the donation part, and they have myth. They're going to touch my spinal cord. No, nobody's going to touch your spinal cord, because if they touch your spinal cord, you're going to be paralyzed. So doctors are not going there, and 80% of the time it's very similar to the blood donation, and people don't know about this. And so many things that they don't know. So when people are scared and they have something in their head, and they don't have the proper education, so it's not a surprise that that we don't have a lot of stem cell donors in Canada.
And how you, because I find you have two parts to what you're doing. One is reactive. It's
Yeah.
like you said, it's like getting the awareness out there when there are people that that don't have access to like part of that like that $25 million pool of candidates. And then the other one is more proactive, right? Education, recruitment, getting people to give, speak at schools. Right now, the method of being able to promote is really creating people to just sending them to donation clinics. I imagine, right? So it's like, hey, like find your local clinic in Montreal or in Toronto or in Vancouver. I imagine that's the main way you're promoting people to go and give.
The only way that they can give, honestly, is there's no clinic. That's the thing. There's no clinic. So whether they can order their kit online, or we do a conference, or there's a swab drive, and then they can swab on premise. But that's it. There's no clinic otherwise. But yes, there's a huge problem of awareness and education. And then I find that when we give those conferences to students in universities, and when we do swap drives, then they understand, and then they want to register. It's not just advertising. So I think when they see patient campaigns, they're like, oh, that's sad. But then they don't do anything about it because they didn't get that education. So proactive and reactive, it really goes together.
Yeah. How do you set objectives? Like I was looking at your website, you have annual reports, right? Like, how do you like? It's funny because it's like, the hope doesn't sound macabre, but it's like you're literally saving lives. You could have like targets of like how many lives will we save this year. um,
Yeah.
how do you think about growth in the context of a nonprofit, right? Like you obviously used to the media landscape, like, okay, we want to grow for the companies we work with. How do you think about planning for this, I don't want to call it a business, but like for this, like obviously life-saving endeavor?
Oh, it's so difficult, honestly, to have objectives and to meet them, because one is we have to, as a nonprofit, we have to fundraise. We're not a for profit, so we have objectives to fundraise, and with the amount of fundraising, set, that we're pretty comfortable with, then we can set out the business, not the business objective, but the number of people that are going to be swabbed, the number of conference that we're going to do, the number of patients that we're going to help. And so it's really, it again, it goes together. But my God, it's not easy to say, yeah, well, this year we're going to do this and that. It's not as a direct effect. And I wish it was, but it's not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a longer term project, obviously, right? You mentioned like fundraising as a means of keeping the lights on. I'm curious to hear just about general research in the category, right? Because it's like it feels like there's been a lot of like advances on the healthcare side. Is that something you pay attention to? Obviously, active like combating leukemia, but obviously just more generally in the healthcare space. Anything you could speak to that front that you're excited about for people to avoid what happened to you?
Yes. Well, I think when I started Swab the World, the first thing that I did is I talked to doctors and researchers. And I told them, if you're going to tell me that in the next year you're going to find the miracle drug, or that with our own stem cells, we don't need anything anymore because you're going to do something with the lab, then I won't do a charity because it's so much work. And they told me that right now there's nothing that can compete a perfect donor. There's research being done it's so exciting, because right now, when it's a cord blood, before, like only 8 years ago, I only weigh 50 kilos, 110 pounds, and then I had access to that cord blood. But right now, what they're doing is they're expanding the cord blood. So they're reproducing the cord blood. They're expanding it to have more stem cells within that cord blood, and then more people can have access to 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 those umbilical cords. But is everybody doing this right now? No. Is it something that is being done to replace a donor? No. But what we do is we're helping. We're helping doctors, and so doctors know that, okay, well, if I have somebody that has leukemia or a blood disease, then I have a perfect match, or I have the expanded cord blood, or I have this, or I have that. So we're giving ammunition to doctors to choose the perfect tool to treat the patient.
What surprised you the most throughout this journey, right? Like now, like obviously 9 years in from your recovery, like I imagine there's must be incredible stories of generosity, incredible stories of perseverance, and obviously a lot of just grit, building a nonprofit that didn't exist before. As like you willed this into the world. Yeah, maybe some lessons with a bit of perspective.
When I wanted to launch Swab the World, and I talked to a lot of people, and they said, "Why are you doing this? This is going to be very difficult." And honestly, they were absolutely right. It is very difficult, and you need to have a lot of grit. But I think you really have to listen to your internal voice. And there's a really big negative voice that says, you can't do it. You don't know what you're doing. You don't have enough experience. But there's like, I don't know how to say it. And I think it's super corny, but I think honestly, there's a little voice inside that says, yeah, I think you got it. Or if you don't have it, just ask people, just be nice to people, ask around. And they might guide you to the right way. And then I think also that um Jesus, you have to hustle so much because nobody's gonna do it for you. And so it takes a lot of grit, and you have to persevere, and yes, it's very easy to just let it go and say, yeah, I'm not built for this. There's a lot of fear going in. There's always doubt. There's always fear. There's not a moment in Swab or starting Swab that I was like completely satisfied. I'm always unsatisfied because I think there's so much potential that we haven't tapped. So I'm still in that journey, honestly. So don't have a perfect answer for that.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer personally, right? Like I tend to talk to a lot of startups. I'm on this podcast, and what you're sharing is like it's a startup story, right? Like of this imposter syndrome and this self doubt all the time. And it's like the lesson here is that no one knows, like no one, like at all, like and everyone's pretending. That's the other thing too. It's like even the successful people pretended their way there. There is no path, right? So yeah, kudos to you to obviously building it to where you've gone so far. And it takes that, like you said, that hustle mindset of like one obstacle over the other, left foot, right foot, just continuing to build. Have you developed a bigger vision of where you want to take it? I imagine eradicating the disease entirely would be like awesome, but it maybe not as realistic. But any like semi-realistic goals that are more far out that you've set for Swab?
Yeah, I one of the things that we want to do is we want to have so right now we're focusing on university um, in Quebec, but 2023 and 2024 would like to extend it to rest of Canada. And honestly, we would love to swab the army. That's a game changer for the Germany registry. They are the most um, responsive and committed donors out there because their biggest pool are people from the army, and so they were able to swap the army, and that's something that I would really like to tackle in this year and next year. And so people out there that are listening to the podcast, if you have any contacts with the army, um, men, because most preferred donors by physicians are men. Men are bigger, and their stem cells are like they have more stem cells than women. And when women are giving birth, then our DNA changes a bit. So it's honestly for physicians. Physicians prefer men, young men, and the army. It's young men, diversity through the roof, and so these are the people that we want to swap. So expand to Canada and army.
Okay. I'll have some contacts, not many in the army side, but yeah, maybe we'll chat offline. And I think it's
Right.
like I said, in terms of knowing your persona, going back to media lessons. Okay, like the persona, like the young men in the military that are healthy,
Yeah.
right? Like that's not a bad persona to go after. Like I was thinking of like, oh, on this podcast, maybe we'll geek out like we used to talk about media, but it's like I think it's kind of less important considering what you're building. Start asking you like dumb questions about the media landscape. Obviously, I just continued success in what you're building. It's been obviously very cool to see you do it. Obviously, after suffering some pretty intense hardships. I guess final question would be if for the audience, any asks where people can learn more, any requests.
The only thing is go check out our website, swabtheworld.com. All the information is there. We're very present also on social media, mostly on Instagram, but and also if there's any educators like profs, we do conferences in psychology class, in med class, in business class. Just invite us. 20 minutes. We're gonna swab your students. It's gonna change. It's gonna change their life, and it's gonna potentially change patients' lives too.
Yeah, helping to change the world, right? So, like pun intended. Maya, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
As always, thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. If you want to learn more, check out thepnr.com.